Teacher mocks boy for saying Mike Tyson is his dad and instantly regrets it. Rain lashed against the glass of Mrs. Periwinkle's fourth-grade classroom, blurring the outside world into an impressionistic canvas. T.O. Billy, self-proclaimed cosmos to a coterie of dandelion-nibbling squirrels. These weren't mere raindrops. They were portals to nebulae only he could perceive, shimmering realms where the constellations pirouette to unheard melodies. The Great Bear, in his cosmos, transformed into a celestial koi, gliding through rivers of stardust, his absent father, once a fond audience to these flights of fancy, was now, Billy maintained, on a promotional tour, showcasing his zero-G knockouts, boxing gloves to intergalactic fight clubs. Mike Tyson's zero-G knockouts, he'd repeat to himself, a talisman against the void. Cunningham. Anyone home, Cunningham? Mr. Harrison's voice, as grating as chalk on a blackboard, snapped Billy back to the mundane. The rain-streaked window reverted to a pane of condensation, and zero-gravity boxing gloves dissolved into the ether of his runaway imagination. Arms folded, Mr. Harrison radiated world-weary resignation. His tie hung crooked, and his gaze held the perpetual squint of a man drowning in a sea of forgotten dreams. Care to rejoin the planet, cosmos? Or are you still conferring with beings from beyond? A ripple of laughter spread through the room, each chuckle a tiny pinprick to Billy's soul that a blush blossomed on his cheeks as his carefully constructed universe crumbled like day-old bread that he loathed. That nickname, a constant reminder of his otherness, his perceived disconnect from reality. Mr. Harrison expelled a breath that spoke volumes about overdue assignments and the lingering bitterness of a recent divorce. He'd begun the year with optimistic fervor, brimming with innovative lesson plans, and the occasional, self-deprecating quip. But the initial spark had fizzled, leaving behind only the dregs of obligation. Now, he merely went through the motions, counting down the seconds to summer's liberating bell. "All right, class," he announced, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Tomorrow, as you recall, is Share Your Family Day. Bring in a photograph, a memory, anything that encapsulates your unique family connections." A nervous flutter stirred in Billy's stomach, a cocktail of anticipation and apprehension. For weeks, he'd been meticulously crafting his contribution, a story of epic proportions. He envisioned himself at the front of the class, clutching a time-worn Polaroid. The image depicted a smaller Billy perched confidently on the knee of a towering figure, a distinctive tribal tattoo coiling around his left eye. "This," he would declare, his voice resonating with unshakable conviction, "is my dad, the one and only Mike Tyson." The gasps of disbelief, the envious glances, the sheer, palpable awe. He had rehearsed it all in front of his bedroom mirror, perfecting the delicate balance of nonchalant coolness and genuine affection. But Mr. Harrison's voice, laced with weariness, intruded again. "And Cunningham," he added, his gaze settling on Billy with a flicker of what might have been pity or simple exasperation. "Let's try to maintain a semblance of reality this year, shall we? No more fantastical yarns about swashbuckling grandmothers or astronaut uncles." The laughter intensified, sharper and more pointed this time. That Billy's cheeks burned with shame. His grip tightened on his pencil until it snapped with a brittle crack. Cosmos, the intrepid explorer, retreated, replaced by a vulnerable boy fighting back the sting of tears. That he understood, on some level, that his story was an elaborate fabrication, a bulwark against the loneliness that threatened to engulf him. But Mr. Harrison didn't need to expose it. He didn't need to dismantle the fragile scaffolding of his imaginary world. He stared at the fractured pencil, the graphite staining his fingers. He wouldn't share it. He wouldn't offer them the satisfaction of witnessing his humiliation. Let them cling to their pedestrian families and their predictable existences. He had entire galaxies to chart, even if they existed solely within the confines of his mind. And tomorrow, he resolved, Cosmos would journey to a realm where Mr. Harrison's cynicism held no power. My dad, the champ. The air in Mrs. Davison's third-grade classroom crackled with nervous energy. It was Share Your Family Day, and the usual cacophony of whispers and shuffling feet was amplified tenfold. Billy Cosmos, Cunningham clutched his poster board, its edges already softened from the warmth of his sweaty palms. He'd spent the better part of the weekend perfecting it. layering glitter glue and meticulously cutting out star-shaped confetti point one by one. His classmates went up. Sarah showed off photos of her identical twin sisters, giggling shyly as Mr. Harrison, their substitute teacher, feigned surprise at the mirrored images. Even Marcus, usually stoic and reserved, beamed as he described his grandfather's prize-winning pumpkin. Billy waited, his heart hammering against his ribs, picturing the moment he'd unveil his own family. Finally, only he and Emily were left. Mr. Harrison, leaning back in Mrs. Davison's floral print chair, gestured towards Billy. "All right, Cosmos, let's see what you've got." Billy walked to the front of the class, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. He flipped the poster board around, revealing a colossal image of a young Mike Tyson, his face a mask of ferocious determination. In bold, glittery letters, Billy had written, "My dad, the champ." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Billy puffed out his chest, a wide grin spreading across his face. "This is my dad," he announced proudly, pointing to the picture. "He's the best boxer in the whole world. He can knock anyone out with one punch." He launched into an animated description of Tyson's legendary career, his voice filled with awe and admiration. He described imagined training sessions, early morning runs in the park, and pep talks before imaginary fights. Mr. Harrison watched, his lips twitching. The grin faltered on Billy's face as he noticed the teacher's expression. When Billy finished, breathless and beaming, Mr. Harrison let out a short, sharp bark of laughter. "Seriously, Cunningham," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Mike Tyson, that's your dad? And I'm dating Beyoncé. Get real." A wave of laughter washed over the classroom, louder and more pointed than before. Billy's face burned. He felt the carefully constructed world he'd built around himself, the stories he used to fill the empty spaces, crumbling into dust. He looked around at his classmates, their faces contorted in amusement. Emily, who usually smiled at him during reading time, was giggling behind her hand. Tears welled in Billy's eyes. He wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never be seen again. That he grabbed his poster board, the glitter glue digging into his fingers, and stumbled back to his desk. The laughter followed him, each sound a tiny pinprick to his already wounded heart. He slammed the poster down, burying his face in his arms, and wished, with every fiber of his being, that Mr. Harrison would just disappear. Tears and a vow. The jeers at Billy's expense propelled him from the classroom like a shot. Mr. Harrison's lecture, an ill-timed discourse on honesty, pursued him. "So you see, class, the importance of truth. Unlike Billy, who apparently believes Iron Mike is his progenitor. He didn't register the smirks or the looks of discomfort. Escape was the only imperative. He bolted down the corridor, past the curious gazes of Mrs. Gable's third graders, and burst through the exit doors into the welcoming emptiness of the parking lot. Tears blurred his vision, each sob a fresh wave of shame washing over him. He sought refuge behind the dumpster by the bike racks, a spot usually reserved for solitude with his comics. Now, it was the sole sanctuary he could imagine. That he drew his knees to his chest, the denim a coarse comfort. Tyson isn't my dad. He lamented internally. But God, I wish. A memory surfaced, 7 years old, watching other kids greeted by their fathers after school. Dads with booming voices and strong handshakes. Fathers who played catch and tousled hair. His own reality? Mom, perpetually worn out from double shifts at the diner. He had conjured an image of Tyson, the epitome of strength, as the paternal figure he yearned for, a protector, a hero. He recalled practicing his boxing stance before the mirror, mimicking Tyson's rhythm. He'd even adopted the moniker Cosmos, a nod to D'Amato. A childish game. A private world now brutally exposed. The humiliation stung, a raw and pervasive ache. That it was more than just embarrassment. It was a profound sense of rejection. That he wasn't enough. His stories, his fantasies, weren't enough. He was inadequate. That he scrubbed his eyes, leaving streaks of dirt on his cheek. That a fragile resolve began to take root in the wasteland of his despair, a nascent determination forcing its way through the cracks. That he wouldn't validate Mr. Harrison's cruel assessment. That he wouldn't let this define him. That he rose, brushing off his jeans. The school loomed, a stark reminder of his perceived failure. But he would not remain hidden. He wouldn't be eternally on the run. He wouldn't return to that classroom. Not yet, at least. I'll prove him wrong, he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. I'll prove them all wrong. The specifics were vague, yet the commitment hung heavy in the air. He would forge his own path. He would become someone of consequence, someone impervious to ridicule, someone who perhaps deserved a father like Tyson. He began to walk, away from the school's mocking presence, toward an unwritten future he was determined to realize. He had a point to make, and he would make it, the principal's office. The scent of lemon polish, usually a comforting staple of the school, felt sharp and acidic in Mrs. Davies's nostrils. That it was a Thursday, late afternoon, the lights slanting long and low through the blinds in her office. She'd been grading essays on The Great Gatsby when the hesitant knock came. "Come in," she said, her voice a shade crisper than intended. That it was Mrs. Olson, the history teacher, her face a wrinkled map of unease. "Margaret, do you have a moment?" Mrs. Davies gestured to one of the upholstered chairs facing her desk. "Of course, Elsie, what is it?" Elsie shifted, her tweed skirt rustling. "It's about Arthur Harrison and young Marcus. In his English class today." The story unfolded in Elsie's hushed tones, painting a picture of Art's alleged jest about Marcus's claim. The subsequent visitor, Mrs. Davies, listened, her expression hardening with each syllable. The absurdity of it all was almost comical, yet the potential fallout was anything but. "Thank you, Elsie," she said when the older woman had finished. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. You did the right thing." Elsie mumbled something about hoping she hadn't overstepped and retreated, leaving Mrs. Davies to the simmering pot of her own thoughts. She buzzed Art's classroom on the intercom. "Mr. Harrison, would you please come to my office?" Immediately. He arrived 10 minutes later, looking rumpled and radiating an aura of bored defiance. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You wanted to see me, Margaret?" The use of her first name, a blatant attempt at casual familiarity, didn't go unnoticed. "Close the door, Arthur, and have a seat." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. He pushed himself off the doorframe with a sigh and sauntered to the chair, slumping into it as if it were a beanbag. "So, what momentous event requires my immediate presence?" "Your interaction with Marcus Bell in class today," she said, cutting straight to the point. "Elsie Olson informed me of what transpired." A flicker of something unease crossed his face, quickly masked by a sardonic smirk. "Ah, yes, the Tyson incident." A bit of levity. "Margaret, surely you can appreciate a good joke?" "Arthur," she said, her voice dangerously low. "This is not a joke. That a student made a vulnerable statement, and you chose to ridicule him. That is unacceptable and potentially damaging." "Damaging? He'll survive. Kids are resilient." He waved a dismissive hand. "Besides, the guy did show up. It was unexpected." "Unexpected is an understatement. And that guy, as you so eloquently put it, is a celebrity. This could escalate, Arthur. Media attention, parental complaints, lawsuits." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Your behavior was unprofessional, inappropriate, and frankly, juvenile." His smirk faltered. "So what? You gonna suspend me? Fire me? For a little harmless fun? Consider this a formal warning, Arthur," she said, ignoring his sarcasm. "One more incident like this, one more lapse in judgment, and I will be forced to take further disciplinary action. I make myself clear?" He stared at her, his face a mask of resentment. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Crystal. Good. Now, I suggest you spend some time reflecting on your actions and consider how you can better support your students. You're dismissed." He stood, his movements stiff, and walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. "You know," he said, his voice low and laced with bitterness, "you used to be fun." A message to Iron Mike. The screen cast a spectral glow on Billy's face, the only light in the otherwise murky room. He'd been submerged for hours in a digital torrent of Mike Tysonalia. Knockout compilations, bygone interviews, stylistic analyses, even shaky footage of his pigeon obsession, in overwhelming volume, chronicling a life perpetually under scrutiny. Rubbing the grit from his eyes, he knew he had to find a way. He needed to reach the man, For Mrs. Davison, for his own sake, for the promise he'd made. He navigated to Tyson's official Instagram. Millions followed the account, verified with a blue badge of authenticity. Recent posts showed him clouding up a podcast set and pushing his new hot sauce. Billy worried his lip. How could his small, desperate plea possibly penetrate such a cacophony? He tapped the message icon. The empty field felt vast, intimidating that a few tentative starts went straight to digital oblivion. Dear Mr. Tyson. Stilted. Hey Mike. 2 forward. Iron Mike. He finally typed. It struck a chord of respectful familiarity. He unleashed a torrent of words, his fingers dancing across the keyboard, bearing his soul. He recounted the agonizing episode with Mrs. Davison, the jeering laughter that still rang hollow in his memory. He painted a picture of her kindness, her unwavering faith in him. Even when he'd felt like a charlatan, he spoke of the vow, the urgent need to vindicate her belief. I know this sounds improbable, Iron Mike, he typed, but Mrs. Davison deserves to know her faith wasn't misplaced. She needs to see I wasn't just spinning yarns, and I genuinely believe you're uniquely positioned to deliver that. Even a brief acknowledgement, a simple, keep your chin up, Billy, would mean everything to her. And to me. He paused, then added, I understand you're incredibly busy, a true icon, but please, give this some thought. This isn't about chasing fleeting celebrity, it's about validating goodness and righting a wrong. He scanned the message, cringing at its almost painful candor. He felt exposed, vulnerable in the cold light of the digital world. Nevertheless, he hit send. The message dissolved into the digital void. Consumed by the internet's immensity, he shut his laptop, anxiety coiling in his gut. He understood the odds were astronomical, a long shot in the dark, but he had to try. Hope, however tenuous, was all he had. He compulsively checked his phone, the screen flashing with trivial notifications. But Tyson's Instagram remained silent. He pictured the boxing great in some lavish setting, cursorily glancing at his DMs, perhaps spotting his missive, perhaps dismissing it with a flick of his thumb. Hours dissolved into the night. The house stilled, save for the refrigerator's low thrummed. He remained vigilant, his phone a tangible anchor in his hand. Each unanswered ping felt like a tiny puncture wound of disappointment. As dawn's first light filtered through the window, streaking the room with early morning gray, he finally succumbed to sleep, the unread message a nagging presence in his dreams. The champ response. The tablet's luminance painted the otherwise black room. Mike Tyson, propped against a fortress of pillows, absently navigated the currents of Twitter, not seeking anything specific. He simply let the ceaseless river of opinions and memes flow around him, a nightly attempt to soothe the turmoil within. Just as he was about to power down, a trending hashtag snagged his attention. Hashtag Justice for Billy. Intrigue sparked. He tapped. The initial post displayed a blurred snapshot of a young boy clutching a drawing. Then the story unfolded. The teacher, the insensitive remark, the kid identifying Iron Mike as his father. The dry chuckle escaped Mike. He'd been down this road before. But then Billy's art registered that it wasn't some simplistic cartoon. It was a remarkably accurate portrait of him in his fighting days, a fierce snarl etched on his face. Below, a child's handwriting declared, My dad is the best fighter ever. A pang resonated in Mike's core that he recalled his own childhood, the longing for connection, for a champion, someone to have faith in him, the scornful laughter of a teacher. The memory echoed, even through the digital barrier. This moved beyond himself. It centered on Billy, on the devastating humiliation of being ridiculed before peers. He consumed the remaining posts, each pixel contributing to a sharper understanding of the perceived wrong. His grip tightened on the device. The faint whir of the iPad seemed to amplify his escalating indignation that he knew the caricature the world projected onto him. The brute, the loose cannon. But he also knew the profound fortitude found in safeguarding the vulnerable. He cast the tablet onto the plush carpet, the sound swallowed by the deep fibers. Action was required. He had to reassure Billy that someone believed in him, that he secured his phone, its heft grounding him. He punched in a number dormant for years. Hey, it's Mike, he rumbled. I need a solid track. Down a school, an elementary school, somewhere in Connecticut, and give me a visit. No advance notice. He waited, listening to the barrage of questions from the other line. Forget the security parade. Just me. It's personal, and I need it to happen fast. Tomorrow, if humanly possible. He disconnected, a sense of intention solidifying within him. The beast remained, but now laser-focused, directed, not fueled by raw aggression, but the need to stand up for a little boy who dared to dream. That he gazed out at the approaching dawn, a sliver of luminance piercing the darkness. Tomorrow, he would prove to Billy that even the most outlandish claims might, occasionally, become reality, and perhaps impart a lesson to a certain teacher about the profound strength inherent in kindness. The surprise visit. The clock ticked with the lethargic rhythm of a dying man's heartbeat. Another Tuesday, another descent into the fluorescent-lit purgatory of room 212. Harrison stared out the window, watching a flock of pigeons squabble over a discarded crust of bread. He envied their simple, instinctual existence. NOSAs to grade, no vacant stares to decipher, just bread and the primal urge to survive. Inside, Billy Cunningham was mid-monologue, detailing, for the 5th time this week, his interdimensional travels with a purple-skinned alien named Zorp. And then, Zorp. He looks at me, see, with his 3 eyes all blinking, and he says, "Cosmos, you gotta help me. The Glargonians are coming to steal the what, Billy?" Harrison cut in, the edge in his voice barely concealed. "The last shred of my sanity? The will to live? Please, enlighten us." A few of the kids snickered. Billy's face crumpled, the vibrant color draining away like watercolor in the rain. That he mumbled something about a cosmic scepter and trailed off, picking at a loose thread on his threadbare sweater. Harrison sighed, instantly regretting his harshness. That IT was a reflex, a defense mechanism built over years of dealing with the relentless banality of adolescence. But Billy was different. He was a raw nerve, a fragile ecosystem teetering on the brink of collapse. Just as Harrison was about to offer a half-hearted apology, the classroom door creaked open. All eyes turned. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the harsh hallway light, was Mike Tyson. Not a reasonable facsimile, not a surprisingly accurate impersonator, but the Mike Tyson, the man, the myth, the legend with the facial tattoo. A collective gasp swept through the room. Even Harrison, a man who prided himself on his unflappability, felt his jaw slacken. Tyson's eyes, usually described as cold and predatory, scanned the room with a surprising gentleness. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, looking almost ordinary. Almost. "Is this Mr. Harrison's class?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the room. A nervous cough escaped from someone in the back row. Harrison, still frozen in disbelief, managed a weak nod. Tyson stepped into the room, his presence immediately shrinking the space. "I'm looking for Billy Cunningham." Billy, who had been staring at the floor, snapped his head up, his eyes widened, reflecting the fluorescent lights like twin moons. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. The room was silent, save for the frantic thumping of Harrison's heart. That he watched, mesmerized, as Mike Tyson's gaze settled on Billy. A small, almost hesitant, smile touched the corner of the former heavyweight champion's mouth. "Hey, champ," Tyson said, his voice softer now. "Mind if I have a word?" "A lesson learned." Tyson filled the doorway, a silent, looming figure, perched on the edge of his desk, mid-bite into a Granny Smith. Mr. Harrison glanced up, his expression a cocktail of startlement and thinly veiled irritation. "Can I assist you, Mr. Tyson, isn't it?" The man's voice resonated, a deep, sonorous note entirely at odds with Mr. Harrison's usual sharp, biting cadence. "I believe so. IT concerns Billy." Mr. Harrison exhaled heavily, a performance of exasperation, and tossed the apple core with a flick of the wrist towards the trash. "Here we go. Look, I understand familial protectiveness, but the boy possesses a fantastical mind. IT requires tempering." "Tempering?" Tyson advanced, his shadow stretching across the gleaming linoleum. "Or encouraging, validating, even. I'm not dictating your pedagogy, Mr. Harrison, but I am pointing out that words carry weight. They can either buoy a spirit or shatter it completely." Tyson paused, his gaze direct and unwavering. "Billy's a good kid, with a boundless heart and an even more expansive imagination. Don't penalize him for that. Foster it, and crucially, believe him." Mr. Harrison scoffed, folding his arms. Believe him? He proclaimed you were his father. That's wishful thinking bordering on delusion. Does it cause harm? Tyson countered, his tone even, though edged with steel. Or is it perhaps filling a need? Perhaps he lacks a figure to admire. Perhaps he yearns for a hero. Instead of derision, why not attempt to embody that hero? Extend some grace, some empathy. The usual sarcasm seemed to leach from Mr. Harrison's features, replaced by a fleeting, unreadable expression. His gaze faltered, settling on the papers scattered across his desk. The room thrummed with unspoken sentiments. It isn't that simple, Mr. Tyson. You don't comprehend. Kids like these, they're brutal. Any perceived vulnerability. Vulnerability? Tyson interjected gently, his voice taking on a softer timbre. Showing compassion isn't weakness, Mr. Harrison. It's a display of inner fortitude. It demands courage to be open, to forge connections, especially with a child. Reflect on that. Tyson turned to go, pausing at the threshold. Billy is owed an apology. The following morning, Billy hunched over his desk, eyes fixed on the worn tabletop. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the sudden, palpable quiet of the room. He stood before them, hands clasped behind his back, appearing unusually ill at ease. "Class," he began, his voice remarkably subdued. "I owe Billy an apology. I was insensitive. I failed to listen, and I disregarded his feelings. Billy, I am genuinely sorry. Your imagination is a treasure, and I should never have diminished it. That I was in the wrong." Billy looked up, surprise widening his eyes. The tentative smile blossomed on his face, in a gesture that astonished everyone, including himself. Mr. Harrison offered Billy a wink. The strained atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a low thrum of shared understanding. Perhaps, just perhaps, Mr. Harrison had gleaned something of value. And perhaps, just perhaps, Billy felt, for the first time, truly seen. New beginnings. The late afternoon sun painted the park in hues of amber and rose as Tyson and Billy walked. Billy, usually bouncing with nervous energy, was almost serene. That he held a disposable camera, a gift from Tyson, like it was a precious artifact. "Okay, Mr. Tyson, pose by the big oak tree. Pretend you're, like, guarding a secret treasure." Tyson chuckled, obliging. He struck a goofy pose, one hand shielding his eyes, the other flexed in a mock bicep. Billy snapped the picture, the whirring of the camera echoing in the quiet park. They continued like this, capturing the mundane and transforming it into something extraordinary through Billy's enthusiastic direction. Tyson, surprisingly, found himself enjoying the ridiculousness of it all. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about training or endorsements or the relentless pressure of his public image. He was just a guy in a park, making memories with a kid who thought he was the coolest person on earth. Back in his cramped apartment, Arthur Harrison sat hunched over a half-eaten sandwich, the silence amplifying the gnawing feeling in his gut. He replayed the day's events in his mind, the shame a bitter taste on his tongue. That he'd seen the genuine hurt in Billy's eyes, a vulnerability he hadn't anticipated. And then, Tyson, the man was surprisingly gentle. Arthur had expected anger, confrontation, but instead, he'd been met with a quiet dignity that disarmed him completely. He pushed the sandwich away, the appetite gone. He had to do better. The next day, Arthur walked into class with a different kind of energy. Gone was the clipped sarcasm, the sardonic glint in his eye. "All right, settle down," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Today, we're going to try something different. Instead of dissecting Shakespeare, we're going to build worlds." He gestured to a pile of art supplies he'd secretly purchased. "I want you to create a diorama of your dream landscape. No rules, no limitations. Let your imaginations run wild." A murmur rippled through the class. Billy's eyes widened, a spark of excitement igniting within them. That he grabbed a shoebox and began sketching furiously, a smile playing on his lips. Later that afternoon, the local newspaper ran a small article with a picture of Billy holding a drawing of Mike Tyson as a superhero. He'd helped an elderly woman cross a busy street. The caption read, "Local boy a hero." The school principal proudly posted the article on the school's website. Billy, once the target of jokes, was now a local hero. For the first time, Billy felt seen, not as that kid with the crazy stories, but as someone worthy of admiration.